Hi, good evening.
Good ma'am.
Screen is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. So I'm Himanshu. So today is your week six tutorial for the basics of biology course. Um, so let's start the first question for this tutorial. The question one: the concept of central dogma of molecular biology to explain the mechanism of flow of genetic information in living organism was proposed by. So option A is Roger Mendel, option B is Francis Crick, and option C is Charles Darwin, and option D is Barbara McClintock.
Option B, ma'am.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, then let's see. So very good, you are right. That option B is the right answer. That is Francis Crick. So this is the central dogma that it is proposed by this Francis Crick, and it describes the flow of genetic information. How this information, like which is stored in the form of DNA, it is transcribed into the RNA, and then RNA further translate into the protein. the, the flow of that genetic information is transferred from DNA to RNA, RNA to protein. We call it as central dogma. So the moving to the next question, the primer synthesis in eukaryotes it's carried out by option A is DNA polymerase alpha, option B is DNA polymerase epsilon, option C is DNA polymerase delta, and option D is DNA polymerase eta. Neta. Primer synthesis. Anyone? Any guesses?
Ma'am, I think option A.
Okay. Okay, then let's see. You are right. Option A is the right answer. That is DNA polymerase alpha. So, what is this primer synthesis and all? So, during the process of DNA replication, a short RNA primer is needed to initiate the DNA synthesis. because DNA polymerase can't synthesize the nucleotide with themselves. So that's why during the DNA replication, this short RNA primer is needed to initiate the DNA synthesis. So this primer synthesis is initiated by a special enzyme complex. In eukaryotic cells, this special enzyme complex is through the DNA polymerase alpha, which is responsible for both primer synthesis as well as initial DNA elongation. So, in case of eukaryotic cells, both the processes, primer synthesis as well as initial DNA elongation is done by this DNA polymerase alpha. We know that what are the steps of this primer synthesis. There are three steps. One is primase activity, and then extension, and then handover to other polymerase. So we know that initially the primer synthesis as well as elongation is done by this DNA polymerase alpha. So these has an associated primase that synthesize a very short RNA primer, about 10 nucleotides. Then DNA polymerase alpha extend the primer by adding short stretch of DNA, that is 20 to 30 nucleotide. After the primer is made, then DNA polymerase delta will come in case of lagging strand, and epsilon it's come in case of leading strand to take over the complete DNA replication. Then after the 20 to 30 nucleotides, this DNA polymerase alpha will go out, and what will come? This DNA polymerase delta and DNA polymerase epsilon. If it is the lagging strand, then it delta will come. If it is a leading strand, then epsilon will come, and it will take over the complete DNA replication and complete the DNA replication process. So moving to the next question, the strand that serve as the leading strand for joining the Okazaki fragments by DNA ligases. For joining the Okazaki fragments, option A is leading strand, option B is a cording strand, option C is lagging strand, and option D is non-template strand. Here Okazaki fragments are there.
Option C, ma'am.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, then let's see. Oh, you are right. Lagging strand is the right answer. So here we can see that in which this DNA polymerase will synthesize this stretch of DNA in continuous in one stretch, then we call it as leading strand. But we know that DNA polymerase always synthesize from 5 dash to 3 dash. But here in case of lagging strand, they have to synthesize from 3 dash to 5 dash. But these polymerase will come 5 dash to 3 dash. It will synthesize a short stretch of DNA. Then again it will come and sit. Like that it will form some fragments and we called it as Okazaki fragments. So during the DNA replication, the two strands are copied differently because we know that this DNA polymerase can only synthesize new DNA in the 5 dash to 3 dash direction. So in leading strand, there will be no problem comes because it will synthesize the DNA in continuously in one stretch, 5 dash to 3 dash, and we called it as leading strand. But in case of lagging strand, it will synthesize discontinuously in short fragment, and we called it as Okazaki fragments, which are later joined together by the DNA ligase. Then this stretch of DNA, it also have to ligate, right? That work will done by this ligase enzyme. It will form the phosphodiester bond between these two nucleotide and seal this phosphodiester bond, and so that it will form a continuous fragment of a DNA. Moving to the next question, the protein that prevent further migration of replication fold and help in terminating the process during DNA replication in bacteria is option A is TUS, Option B is TER. Option C is termination replication protein. Option D is replication terminator protein. Any guesses? Any guesses? Okay, then let's see. So TUS is the right answer for this question. What is this TUS protein is? In bacterial DNA replication, this termination process, the termination of the replication process occur at a very specific DNA sequences. And we call this DNA sequences as the TER sites, that is termination sites. However, these sites alone are not sufficient to stop the replication fork, but these sites that is like mostly present so that they can terminate the process, but these termination sites alone are not sufficient. For that, one special protein also required, and we called it as TUS proteins, that is termination utilization substance. These TUS protein binds to the TER sites, and then it will further prevent the migration of the replication fork. So these TER sites are located opposite the ori of the bacterial circular DNA. Then this TERs binds to the TER sites and form the TER-STER complex. These complex then block the helicase enzyme, that is DNA-B helicase, from unwinding the DNA further, so that the replication will halt and ensure so that this replication fork both meet and the properly terminates. So this is the complex, that is this TERS and TER protein complex. So these complex will come, and this is the fork progression is there. Here this DNA helicase B is coming. So what they do is they just like they here it will bind and it will lock so that it will not further unlock the process, right? Unlock this DNA fragments. So there will be no DNA synthesis so that it can properly terminate the DNA replication process. So with the help of this TER-STER complex. TER is a sites and this TER is a special proteins that help in the termination of the replication process. Right? If this complex will not be there, these DNA helicase B will unwind the like this unwind this DNA, and then it will synthesize, like DNA replication will take place. Moving to the next question. If any doubt, then you can ask. The termination of transcription in row independent mechanism occur by the formation of which structure in mRNA? We know that termination of transcription happens in two, like two, basically are of two types. One is row dependent and another one is row independent mechanism. So in the question they ask the termination of transcription in row independent mechanism occur by the formation of which structure in mRNA? Option A is HF and HU protein binding. Option B is DNA and RNA protein binding. Option C is DNA and HU protein binding. And option D is mRNA hairpin structure. Any guesses?
I think option D.
Okay, we'll see. Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, then let's see. You are right. Very good. That is mRNA hairpin structure. So, in case of row independent mechanism, it will form this mRNA hairpin structure and it will terminate the transcription process. So, in case of bacteria, this transcription termination occur by the two mechanism, right? One is row dependent termination and another one is row independent termination. This row dependent termination requires the row proteins. Independent means independent. That means it is not dependent on the row proteins. So it doesn't require this row proteins, but it depends on the formation of special mRNA hairpin structures. So in this mechanism, the newly synthesized mRNA, it will form a hairpin like structure, right? And how it will form, it this hairpin structure it will form, and further it is followed by the uracil series residue, uracil. And these hairpin structure is formed by the AU bases, normally A and U bases. So this hairpin structure cause the RNA polymerase to pause. At whenever this polymerase will reach here hairpin like structure, so it will give the signal to RNA polymerase so that it can pause their activity. So these weak AU based pairing between RNA and DNA leads to the dissociation of mRNA from the template strand, and in this way it will terminate the transcription process. Here we can see that this one is the row dependent. There this row factor will come into the play and bind to the region which have like no secondary structure. Here we can see that this is a secondary structure, right? Here it will bind to the region where no secondary structure is there, that is unstructured RNA is there. Then RNA sequence upstream, like which is present upstream, form the termination doesn't form from termination doesn't form this secondary structure. These row factor bind to the RNA and it will start moving to the 3' end. At a hairpin, transcription slows and row factor can catch up to this DNA to RNA, and it will form the break the hydrogen bond and separate the RNA from DNA. And in case of row independent, here these inverted sequences are there, which is normally made up of this A and U and followed by the U uracil series. These form this hairpin like structure and it will slow the transcription process, like where this inverted complementary sequences are there. And second, this repeat sequence is poly A, that is poly U on RNA, and poly A means DNA. And it is a weak due to because we know that adenine and thymine have two hydrogen bonds. So these transcripts separate from the DNA template and it will avoid the transcription process. Moving to the next question, the direction of synthesis for phosphodiester bond during DNA replication. Option A is 5' to 3' direction. Option B is 3' to 5' direction. Option C is 5' to 3' direction and 3' to 5' direction. And option D is no directionality at all.
Option A.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, then let's see. You are right, very good. That is option A is the right answer. 5 dash to 3 dash direction. So, what happened during the DNA replication? The phosphodiester bond are formed between the nucleotides, so that to create a continuous DNA strand. So, this synthesis always occur in 5 dash to 3 dash direction. Why? Because DNA polymerase have a property they can only add new nucleotide to the 3 dash OH group of the growing DNA strand. So these only they can only add this new nucleotides to the 3 dash OH of this growing DNA strand. And each incoming nucleotide is a DNTP which provide the energy for the formation of this phosphodiester bond. The lagging strand as well as this leading strand both are synthesized in case of this 5 dash to 3 dash direction. The only difference is, as I told earlier also, in case of lagging strand, it will form the short Okazaki fragments and that will later join together. Next is the significant repeated loci from DNA is called as. Option A is Ramplicon, option B is Amplicon, option C is transcription unit, and option D is multipartite unit. Any guesses? Anyone want to answer for this question?
B.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else? Anyone else who want to answer for this question? Okay. So you are right. Option B is the right answer. Very good. Amplicon. These amplicon is the repeated DNA sequences, and amplicons contains this identical or nearly identical DNA sequences. And amplicon is a segment of DNA that is repeated multiple times in a genome. It may be due to the natural or due to artificial amplification. Why we use this term artificial amplification? We use normally like in the laboratory during our experiment in genetics, molecular biology, or the PCR studies. So amplicon is like this repeated DNA sequences. We call it as amplicon. Moving to the next question, the AT-rich region that undergoes the localized melting during the transcriptional initiation in prokaryotes is prokaryotes. Option A is cat box, option B is Tata box, TATA box, option C is GC box, and option D is Pribno box. During the transcription initiation in prokaryotes, the region AT-rich region that will undergo the localized melting. Anyone?
Ma'am, I think option B.
Okay, option D. Anyone else?
Option B, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Sorry, option B. Okay, okay.
A.
Option
A.
E. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, then let's see. So here, option D is the right answer. It's okay. Because this starter box is normally present in case of eukaryotes, and this Pribno box are the like ET rich region which is present in case of prokaryotes. So
Excuse me.
Yes.
In today class, which week are discussed? Which week topic?
Okay, today class is on which topic?
कौन सा week का है ये?
Week 6th.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So in prokaryotic transcription initiation, this the Pribno box is in 80 rich sequences, and these localized at the -10 region of the promoter, right? There is a upstream and downstream region, and it will present in the upstream region of the promoter, that is -10 region of the promoter, and we call it as Pribno box, right? These region play a very crucial role in localize the DNA melting, and it will allow the RNA polymerase to start the transcription process. And why this Pribno box is important? First, like it is found around the 10 base pair upstream of the transcription start site. Here, if we consider that this is the start site, it will present upstream of the this start site and 10 base pair upstream. That's why we call it as -10 region of the promoter. And the sequences, the consensus sequence which is present in the Scribner box is TATAAT, which is rich in adenine and thymine. Because we know that these adenine and thymine base pair have a very weak hydrogen bond than GC pairs. That's why this region easily melts. So here also the AT why it will undergo this melting very easily because of the two hydrogen bond present. That's why this consensus sequence have these 80 sequences. Even in case of eukaryotes also 80 sequences rich regions are present, but there we called it as this data box, and in case of prokaryotes we called it as Pribno box. So this region easily melts and it will separate, and so that this RNA polymerase will come and it will bind and initiate this transcription process. And function is that it was work as a prokaryotic promoter, so that it will help in the RNA polymerase binding. This RNA polymerase then will bind and it will synthesize the nucleotides. The next question is the efficiency of promoter vary with respect to consensus sequence, value as sequence. Option A is closer the promoter sequence to the consensus sequence, the lesser will be the efficiency of promoter. Option B is closer the promoter sequence to the consensus sequence, greater will be the efficiency of the promoter. And option C is farther the promoter sequence to the consensus sequence increase, greater will be the efficiency of promoter. And option D is the efficiency of promoter is not altered by consensus sequences. Anyone? Okay. Anyone? Efficiency of promoter. How it will vary with the consensus sequences. Like if we'll consider the distance, like, like how it will matter. If it is close, then it will increase the promoter efficiency or decrease or no effect at all. Anyone? Okay, let's see. So option B is the right answer. That is, if a promoter is a DNA sequence where RNA polymerase binds and it will initiate the transcription process. And like the closer it is present to this promoter sequence, it will increase the efficiency of the promoter. It's like memory based question, so you have to remember this. Like if it is very close to the this initiation like consensus sequence, it will enhance the activity. The enzyme used in the synthesis of 5S rRNA is RNA polymerase 1, option B is RNA polymerase 2, option C is RNA polymerase 3, and option D is RNA polymerase 4. The enzyme used in the synthesis of 5S rRNA.
Ma'am, I think option B.
Option B. Anyone else? Okay, let's see. Option C is the right answer. It's okay. So this in eukaryotic cells, different type of RNA is synthesized by the different RNA polymerase, and we know that basically there are three types present in case of eukaryotic cells. That is RNA polymerase one, RNA polymerase two, and RNA polymerase three. This RNA polymerase one is synthesized normally the rRNA, and which kind of rRNA? 28S, 18S, and 5.8S. RNA polymerase 2 will synthesize mRNA, that is messenger mRNA, like the transcript-wala RNA, and snRNA and miRNA. And this RNA polymerase 3 synthesize the tRNA, 5S rRNA, and some small RNA. So that's why the 5S rRNA is normally synthesized with this RNA polymerase 3. So this you have to remember that which RNA polymerase will synthesize which kind of RNA, right? So moving to the next question, the correct order for of binding the transcription factor during transcription in eukaryotes is. So option A is A, and then D, and then B, and then F, and then RNA polymerase, and then E and H. Option B is then first is B, and then D, and E, and then F, and then RNA polymerase, and after that A and H. And option C is E and D and F and B, and then H RNA polymerase, and at last transcription factor to A will be bind. And the last option that the transcription factor D, A, B, F, and after that RNA polymerase, and in the end E and H will bind. Anyone? Which is the correct order of binding this transcription factor during the transcription process?
Ma'am, I think option D.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, let's see. Very good. You are right that option D is the right answer. So, in case of this eukaryotic transcription, these RNA polymerase 2, it require the general transcription factors, right, to initiate the transcription. The correct order for their binding is first this D will come. The first factor to bind is the transcription factor D. It's contain the Tata binding protein, that is TBP, and because in case of eukaryotes we have to tell, so but it will recognize and bind to the Tata box, and we know that in case of prokaryotes it's the Privno box, right? So this TBB will recognize the Tata box in the promoter so that it can initiate the transcription process, right? So it will be by this D, and then this A will come and it will stabilize the binding of this D to the promoter. So the promoter binding to the transcription factor D will stabilize by the transcription factor A. And then the factor which recruit the RNA polymerase 2 and also the transcription factor F will be by this transcription factor B. These transcription factor, when this will recruit the F factor, it will associate the RNA polymerase 2 and help in the recruitment to the promoter. So after that, this RNA polymerase 2 will come once this B and F will come. So this B and F will help the RNA polymerase to synthesize the mRNA. BF. Okay, and then E and H. This E will come and it will recruit the H, and this transcription factor H have this helicase activity, and it will unwind the DNA, and which and also the kinase activity. This kinase activity phospholipid the RNA polymerase 2 to start the transcription process. So in this way, these will follow this the order of the binding, right? D, like which first factor which contains have this TBP, that is transcription binding proteins. It will bind to the data box and recognize the promoter sequences. So then transcription factor A will come, it will stabilize the transcription factor D binding to the this consensus sequences data sequences, right? And then B will come, and this B will help in the recruitment of F and RNA polymerase. But once this transcription factor F will come, then only this RNA polymerase will come and synthesize the mRNA. And then E will come, which will help in the recruitment of H. And H as an H, that is H names also suggest that it have this helicase activity. It will unwind the DNA, and also it will phosphorylate the RNA polymerase to so that it can synthesize the like so that it will start the transcription. Moving to the next question, the transcription factor that bind to the minor region of the DNA, minor groove region of the DNA. We know that there are two grooves, that minor groove and the major groove. So the transcription factors that bind to the minor groove region of DNA during transcription in eukaryotes is option A is transcription binding proteins, option B is transcription factor D, and C is transcription factor H, and D is transcription factor A. Anyone?
The transcription
Transcription factor? Any guesses? Anyone? Okay, then let's see. So TBP, that is transcription, that is data binding proteins. In eukaryotic transcription, this TBP, that is data binding protein, it's a very crucial component of the transcription factor T. And as the in the earlier slide also I mentioned that this TBP will binds to the data box in the promoter region of DNA. Unlike the most DNA binding proteins, which mainly interact with the major groove, these TBP have a very unique property. It will bind to the minor groove of the DNA. So why it will bind to the minor groove of DNA? These TBP recognize and bind to the data box sequences, and it will cause the DNA binding so that it will facilitate the transcription initiation. So this interaction widens the minor groove, and it will induce some structural changes in the DNA which make it very easy for other transcription factor to assemble. So that's why the answer is that this transcription binding proteins. It is a special proteins that will bind to the minor groove region of the DNA and help in the transcription process. Right? So moving to the next question, the multifunctional transcription factor, like whichever ATPase activity, helicase activity, and kinase activities. Option A is transcription factor B, option B is transcription factor E, option C is transcription factor H, and option D is transcription factor D. Like whichever various kind of activity. Here you people can guess very easily. Like with the question only you can be able to answer. Anyone?
Option C, ma'am.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, let's see. Very good. The transcription factor H. H as the name also suggests that it have a heligase activity. It's a multifunctional transcription factor which is involved in the eukaryotic transcription initiation, and it has a very three important activity. One is the ATPase activity that will provide the energy for the transcription initiation, and the second one is the helicase activity. It helps in unwinding the DNA at the transcription start site. And the last one is the kinase activity. That this kinase activity, what it will do is it phosphorylate at the CTT domain, that is C terminal domain of the RNA polymerase 2, which is essential for the transition from transcription initiation to the elongation. So this kinase activity will phosphorylate the CTT domain of this RNA polymerase 2, so that it will transit from initiation to elongation step. So this H is the factor which have this multifunctional property, that is ATPase, helicase and the kinase activity. So moving to the next question, the enzyme not involved in the 5' capping is option A is guanyl transferase, option B is guanyl methyl transferase, option C is guanyl cyclase, and option D is methyl transferase. Not involved in the 5' capping. Anyone?
Methyl transferase.
Okay. Anyone else?
Option D, ma'am.
Okay. So two of you are saying option D. Let's see. So here guanyl cyclase is an enzyme that catalyzes the conversion of GTP to cyclic GMP. It has a very important role in the cell signaling, but in case of mRNA capping, it don't have any role. Guanyl methyl transferase have an methyl transferase and guanylyl transferase have a role, but this cyclase is the enzyme. It will convert only GTP to cyclic GMP. It don't have any role in the mRNA capping. So moving to the next question, the snRNA, also known as the ribozyme, having catalytic activity, it will cleave the phosphodiester bond during splicing is option A is U1 and U2, option B is U4 and U5, option C is U1 and U6, and option D is U5 and U6. The snRNA, also known as this, having catalytic and also cleave the phosphodiester bond during splicing, which is the snRNA. Anyone? Sorry. Okay. Um, okay. So this U1 and U6 snRNA, that is small nuclear RNA. These are the very essential component of this spliceosome, and these spliceosome, the complex responsible for the pre-mRNA splicing, and this spliceosome is important for the mRNA splicing, so that it can form the different transcript of the same protein, right? That's why this splicing will take place. And one of the process through which this mRNA splicing occur is through the spliceosome mediated complex. Among these some snRNA have the catalytic as well as act as a ribozyme, that is RNA molecule with enzymatic function. So one is this U6 snRNA. It have a very crucial catalytic role. In splicing, it will cleave the phosphodiester bond during the splicing reaction. And also, not only the catalytic role, it catalyzes the esterification reaction that is required for the removal of intron from pre-mRNA. Like the U6, U1 snRNA involved in the recognition of the 5' splice site. Although it is not directly catalytic, however, U6 snRNA is functionally linked to the U1 during splicing. That's why it's making the combination very relevant in this context, like U1 and U6. But U1 don't have like their catalytic sites, but U6 have. But because it is relevant to this U6, that's why we consider U1 as an RNA also, which have a catalytic activity and it will cleave the phosphodiester bond. But this U1 snRNA have only involved in the recognition of this 5' splice site only. So moving to the next question, the RNA act as a template and provides the codon information for the incorporation of amino acids to in the polypeptide chain is, which provide the codon information. Option A is tRNA, option B is rRNA, option C is mRNA, and option D is mRNA and tRNA. So which RNA act as a template and provide the codon information so that it can incorporate the amino acid in the polypeptide chain. Anyone?
Option C, ma'am.
Okay. Here. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, then let's see. Yeah, you're right. That is mRNA. Here it's mentioned that this RNA act as a template and it will further provide the codon information for the incorporation of amino acids. And we know that only RNA is this messenger RNA, that is mRNA. Is this is the type of RNA that carry the genetic information from DNA, and from DNA to RNA will form, and we call it as transcription, and which serve as a template for the protein synthesis. mRNA is synthesized from the DNA template, and this sequence of the codon, we called it as triplet of codon that will code in the amino acid sequences, right? So in mRNA, it will provide the instruction for incorporating the specific amino acid. Whatever the three sequences of the codon, they'll form the specific amino acids to that into a growing polypeptide chain during translation. So the ribosome reads the codon on the mRNA and transfer RNA so that it will bring the correct amino acids to the ribosome based on the codon sequence. And this ribosomal RNA is a structural component of the ribosome, but it doesn't provide the codon sequence. Since this mRNA is the primary molecules that carry the genetic code in the form of codon, that's why this mRNA act as a template and it will provide the codon information so that it will incorporate the amino acids in the polypeptide chain, and further it will form the protein, right? Moving to the next question, the divalent cation required for the formation of ribosomal units. Which divalent cation is required for the formation of ribosomal units and also the association of subunits to form the ribosomal complexes is? Option A is calcium, option B is zinc, and option C is magnesium, and option D is sodium. So sodium, it's out of the box because it's not a divalent cation, right? So, like, what is the answer for this question? Which type?
Option C, ma'am.
Okay, option C. Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, let's see. You are right. Very good. That is magnesium. Magnesium ions play a very crucial role in formation, stability, and function of ribosome. But the first, like formation of ribosomal units, like this ribosomes are made up of ribosomal RNA and proteins, right? This magnesium is required so that it can properly help in the proper folding and also the stabilization. And also this magnesium ion plays a role in the association of ribosomal units. How? In both prokaryotes, we know that they will form this 70S type of ribosome, and eukaryotes have this 80S ribosome. So this magnesium ion is essential for the binding of this large and small ribosomal unit to form a functional ribosomal complex. So the association is very for this association of this ribosome is very important factor is this magnesium ion. A high concentration, if the magnesium ion have a very high concentration, then it will promote this subunit association. While if it will provide the low concentration, it will leads to the dissociation of the ribosomal subunits. So in this way, this magnesium help in the association of this ribosomal subunit complex. Next in the translation also, magnesium ion is involved in stabilizing this mRNA and tRNA interaction also. So that the proper alignment of this tRNA in the ribosome will occur and it will facilitate the peptide bond formation. So the only divalent cation which is required for the formation of this ribosomal units, also the association of subunits to form the ribosomal complex is the magnesium ion. It will decide whether it will form the complexes or not. Subunit association and all, it will depend on the magnesium divalent cation. So moving to the next question, the factor preventing the association of 30S and 50S subunit during the bacterial translation is like which is the factor which will prevent the association of 30S and 50S in bacterial translation. Initiation factor 1, 2, initiation factor 3 or the release factor 2. Anyone? Anyone? Okay, let's see. So initiation factor 3 is the right answer for this question. What is the role of this initiation factor 3? So first, it prevent the premature ribosome assembly. How it will prevent? These initiation factor itself bind to the 30th subunits so that it will prevent the association with the 50th subunits. It it itself binds to this 30th subunits, then this 50th subunits can't come and bind to this 30th subunit, right? And it will can't form a association of the ribosome and will not form any 70th subunit, right? Because this initiation factor 3 itself bind to the 30th subunit and prevent the association. Next is help the mRNA binding. Also other role of this initiation factor is will ensure that mRNA correctly bind to the 30th subunits at the Shine-Dalgarno sequences. So these initiation factor 3, once it will go, then only 50s will come and it will bind. Otherwise, it will not. First, it will ensure whether this 30th ribosomal units is correctly binding to the ribosomal binding site, that is Shine-Dalgarno sequence. And it will promote the correct initiator tRNA selector. It will ensure that the initiator tRNA in case of prokaryotes is the formyl methionine, right? Formyl methionine is the initiator tRNA. It will bind to the AUG codon in the P site of the ribosomes. It will also ensure by this initiation factor 3. Also, once the initiation complex is correctly assembled, then only this initiation factor 3 release, and so that now once this initiation factor 3 release, then only this 50th subunit will come and bind to the 30th subunits and it will form the functional 70th ribosome for protein synthesis. So the only factor which prevent the association of 30th and 50th subunit, and which is very important also for the correct like binding of this initiation correct binding of this ribosomes to the shine dalgarno sequences, also for the correct initiator, like correct translation process. So it's important also. And once this initiation factor 3 will release, then only this 70s subunit will come, and it will form the 50s subunit will come, and it will form the 70s ribosome for protein synthesis. Moving to the next question, the antibiotic that inhibits the GTPase activity of release factor 1. Option A is tetracycline, option B is erythromycin, option C is puromycin, and option D is trichodermin. Like which inhibit the GTPase activity of release factor 1. Anyone? Anyone? Okay.
Ma'am, I think option C.
Okay. Um, you are right. Option C, very good. Very nice. That's option C is the right answer. So puromycin, it's an antibiotic, and it will disrupt the protein synthesis. How it will disrupt this protein synthesis? It will interfere with the GTPase activity of this release factor 1, right? During the translational termination in bacteria. So what is the role of this release factor 1 in translation termination? These first, the first step is that it will recognize the stop codon, that is UAA and UAG, and it will promote the release of polypeptide chain from the ribosome. And also it will require the GTP hydrolysis, that it have the GTPase activity for its function. How the puromycin inhibits the release factor 1? This puromycin inhibits the GTP activities of release factor 1, so that it can properly so that it can prevent the proper termination of protein synthesis. It mimics the amino acyl tRNA, and it get incorporated into the growing polypeptide chains. After that, it will leads to the premature termination, and in that case, the production of either the truncated protein will form, or maybe the non-functional protein will form. And these action ultimately disrupt the protein synthesis, or like bacterial protein synthesis, and it will kill the bacteria, because it will, like whenever it will give the puromycin to the cells, then they'll eventually die because they can't make the protein, right? Because these will disrupt the bacterial protein synthesis activity. So that's why this action ultimately disrupt the all the protein synthesis, because of the because it mimics the amino acyl tRNA, and it will incorporate, and it will leads to the premature termination, or that will leads to the non-functional protein at all. If no protein will be there, no function at all. So that's why it will disrupt and kills the bacteria. So moving to the last question, the thermostable enzyme used in the PCR, that is polymerase chain reaction, is option A is T4 polymerase, option B is DNA polymerase 1, option C is DNA polymerase 2, and option D is Taq polymerase or PFU polymerase. Thermostable.
Option D. Ma'am.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, let's see. You are right. Very good. It's a very easy question. That is in PCR, a thermostable DNA polymerase is required to withstand the high temperature used, that is 94 to 98 degrees Celsius. So it is possible because of the Taq polymerase, and it is isolated from the Thermus aquaticus, which is a bacteria, and it is thrives in the hot spring area, and it can tolerate high temperature up to 95 degrees celsius it can tolerate. That's why we use in the lab for the polymerase, because normal DNA polymerase can't synthesize the nucleotides, like can't grow the nucleotides as a 3 oh at this 95 degrees celsius. That's why this Tag polymerase will help in the synthesis. And the optimum activity is 72, and it have a no proofreading activity like additional information, so it can introduce the errors. That's why now PFU polymerase will come. It have a proofreading activity also, so so that it will not incorporate any errors. The very good polymerase enzyme now people are using is the PFU polymerase, that is fusion polymerase, and it is isolated also from the bacteria which is living in the very harsh condition, very harsh, like high temperature condition in the hydrothermal vents, that is the Pyrococcus furiosus, and it is more thermostable also, like it can survive up to 98 degrees Celsius, and it has a proofreading also which make it more accurate DNA replication, right? That's all for the today's class. Thank you. Any doubt?
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Bye bye.